Good evening, colleagues. My name is Professor Gisela van Rensburg. I am a professor in the Department of Health Studies, and I'm going to be the presenter tonight with Mrs. Elena Swanepoel, who is the Acting Deputy Director in the College of Graduate Studies, and her portfolio deals with the postgraduate student administration. So we are going to talk about how you prepare yourself for an oral examination or a viva or a viva voce. You will hear the different terms that people are using, but that is a new form of examination that has been implemented in the university for the doctoral students. So we are going to prepare you for this oral examination and talk to you about the policies and procedures and how you can prepare yourself. I'm going to share my screen and Mrs. Swanepoel will start with the presentation.
Hello everyone, good to be with you, and I hope you're going to learn quite a lot tonight. As Prof. Gisela indicated, I'm Elena Swanepoel, and I'm going to take you through what the procedures say about this viva voce or the oral examination. Some people even call it the oral defense. At Unisa, we make use of the term oral examination or the viva voce. And then when the next slide comes up, I will just give you what does the procedures for masters and doctoral students actually indicate about this viva voce. And I want to read it to you and then I'll explain to you. Section 2.4 says, starting with students admitted in 2022 and completing no earlier than 2024, doctoral candidates must deliver an oral defense, the viva voce, of their thesis as a compulsory part of the examination process. The oral examination will be conducted online through a video link. Face-to-face oral examinations can be arranged under exceptional circumstances and must be approved by the executive dean or delegated person of the college concerned. The same examiners appointed to assess the thesis and will also adjudicate its oral defense. That means, Gisela, just go back to that slide. The first one, I just want to explain it to you. If you started with your doctoral qualification in 2022, you will have the viva voce as part of your curriculum. And why does it say completing no earlier than 2024? Colleagues, a doctoral student must be registered for 2 academic years before they are allowed to complete their doctoral qualification. And here it indicates, I want to say 99.99%, it will be an online oral examination. And then face-to-face will happen only in exceptional circumstances. And obviously there's an approval process for that. And I think what is important here to note that the examiners that examine your written part of your examination, they will also be part of your examination for this oral defense. Thank you, Gisela. You can move to the next slide. Furthermore, the procedures say the following. In certain circumstances, a master's candidate may be called upon to deliver an oral defense of their dissertations. So it means that for a doctoral qualification, it is a compulsory part of your examination. For a master's degree, there could be certain departments or certain colleges that indicate that their students must do a viva voce, and then that will be arranged. And I think important to note, if the viva voce is part of your examination process, you will not be awarded the qualification unless you have completed everything that is part of your curriculum, including this viva voce. When I saw this slide, I wondered, why would Prof. Gisela indicate the slide? And I said, it's like sharpening your pencil. And she said, there's so much stress before an exam. So the idea of this pencil, and you must remember it, it's part to prepare you for the exam and also to help you to release a bit of that stress, because there is always that bit of stress when you know there's an exam. I'm sure you've experienced that before, especially in the undergrad part as well. And then the stress writing up your thesis as well. So we hope that you will remember that sharpened pencil. Then I thought, let's just talk about the doctoral examination process when there's also a viva included as part of the curriculum. Now there will not just be a first round of examination, but also a second round. So in your first round, you will submit your thesis for examination. The examiners will provide a provisional report to say they find your thesis to be defensible. Or if it's not defensible, it could mean that they also go and say that you have to rework it and resubmit for examination, or hopefully in very exceptional cases, there could also be the decision that you fail. So we are going to look at the best case scenario. We're going to say your thesis has been found by the examiners to be defensible, and there are provisional reports where they would indicate if there's any corrections that you need to make. Those could be a full stop here, it could be a structure of the sentence, a bit of changes in the wording that you used, or maybe just referring to certain things that are not clear. So they will provide a list of corrections that you've got to make. Now, the NEC, that's the non-examining chairperson, will provide this report to your supervisor. And I always recommend to students, when your supervisor gives you those corrections, do those immediately. Work on it, absolutely dedicating time and allocate time to finish those corrections as quickly as possible. Then, when your supervisor reports to the NEC that you have completed all the corrections to his satisfaction, he is sure that what you have done the examiners will be happy with that. Then the next step will happen. The oral examination will be arranged, and you're going to do the oral exam at a specific time and place, and we will talk about that later, and Prof. Gisela is going to help you to really go through the process on how to prepare for it. There could be after the viva, there could be other corrections that they now want you to make. Again, when you receive those corrections from your supervisor, immediately do them and submit those corrections immediately to your supervisor. After that, then only the official result will happen. And I just mentioned here on the slide about the 2 manuscripts. Remember, that forms part of your curriculum as well. Right, move on to the next slide, please. Then we talk about what is the purpose of the oral examination. Why did Unisa decide to implement this? Colleagues, if you talk to other students at other universities, many of the universities have already implemented this second round of examination process, this oral exam that they are doing. It's almost, I want to say, twofold. It's going to test your knowledge of your research that you've done. It's also going to establish, and during this viva voce, and I think it's so important to understand this, is that the examiners will ask you questions and test you to find out if this really is your own work. So it's important to make sure that you know what your research is all about. And it and that your thesis and the oral exam that you did meet the requirements for a doctoral qualification as it's stipulated in the National Qualifications Framework and the Unisa policy for master's and doctoral degrees. Colleagues, on the Unisa website, if you go to apply, if you go to masters and doctors, you will see on the left-hand side of the frame, it says policy and procedures. You can access the procedures for master's and doctoral qualifications there. You can access the policy for master's and doctoral degrees. Make sure that you know what is in those policies and in those procedures. We can move to there you go. We thought, let me just quickly talk about the general aspects. It will be an oral examination where all your examiners will be present. The first thing that they will do, and I've mentioned this before, when they examine your thesis, when they find your thesis to be defensible and you have done all your corrections, then the viva voce process will start. The viva will be done in English to ensure that everybody in that committee have access to the information that you're going to share, and the examination will take place online. It will be a virtual platform. As I've mentioned before, face-to-face will be in exceptional circumstances. And if there are those, you will be informed in time and that arrangements will be made. But I want to say that it's really about having a virtual platform. What does a virtual platform mean? That could be Skype, it could be Teams, it could be Zoom. Those software that you must make sure that you have any of those software available on your laptop or on your computer. It is important to know that before the oral examination, the NEC will meet up with you to make sure that whether if you decide to use Skype or Teams, that platform is working for you. And obviously, very important is that your examination will be recorded. So all the proceedings will be recorded. And then again, face-to-face, exceptional circumstances, and that will have to be motivated because it must be approved by the executive dean of the college in which you will be completing your doctoral qualification. Then an overview of the process. I'm sorry, it is quite small, but I think it's important that you understand what all the administration involves in this whole viva voce process. I think the big criticism with the university is that our results, it takes so long from where I submit for examination until I actually know whether I've passed the exam. So we took just the snapshot of the viva voce process. The NEC will receive the provisional examination reports of the written exam. If they find it to be defensible, your NEC of your exam will share the reports with the supervisor. You will see it says anonymized reports, so they won't know who it comes from, and then you will receive that from your supervisor. And once the supervisor indicate that you have made all the necessary corrections, that memo will go to the NEC, who will then arrange the viva voce. The viva will take place. Within 1 week after the viva, the examiners must submit a final examination report. Now it's not just that provisional report in the beginning on the written exam, but now they will also look at what happened in the viva and then do a final report to the NEC. The NEC will share these reports for sharing with the candidate. I've mentioned that. And once the corrections have been done, the NEC will compile his final report that will then go through a process of approval from the executive dean of the college right through until all the signatures have been signed off And you can go and read up what all those procedures are, who needs to sign off, all of this. Colleagues, it's not just me deciding, oh, everything looks fine and I sign it. It is a process to make sure that you are treated fairly, that the processes was done correctly. And once the final signatures come through, then that documentation will go to the CGS M&D Research Examination section. Now, I'm the Deputy Director that overview the M&D Research Exam section, the Honours and PGDs, and also the Masters and Doctors applications and registration. So that is just one part of what I oversee. And they will then ensure that you receive your letter and your statement to say that you've completed the process. They will check for each and every single document that comes through. They read through the examiner's reports. They make sure that there's declarations of that there's no interest, no conflict of interest, all of that documentation. It's explained in the procedures. Please make time to have a look at that. And then once that is done, your result is captured on the system and your record card goes to graduations. Once that is done, then there's other work for the NEC as well. He needs to thank the examiners. There's quite a lot of things that he must do, he or she must do, to ensure that everything is in place and that you will then be able to graduate at the next graduation ceremony. Then I want to take you just one slide further, and then I'm going to hand over to Professor Gisela. The examination committee consists of the NEC, I mentioned before, that's the non-examining chairperson. Every student that says, I'm ready to submit, for that student, an NEC is appointed. The NEC will also chair this examination committee of the viva. Then there's the chair of the department. So other universities call about the head of the department. In this case, Unisa call it the chair of the department will be there. The departmental higher degrees committee chairperson will also sit in on the viva Voce. The supervisor, if you have a co-supervisor, the supervisor and the co-supervisor will be in attendance, at least one of them, and then all the examiners that examined your thesis will also be part of this composition of the examination committee. Then I'm going to hand over to Prof. Gisela that will take you through the roles of the committee, that you understand exactly what each person has to do at this committee and what they are responsible for. And she will even take it much further than that. Thank you so much, Gisela. Over to you.
Thank you very much for the informative discussion and explanation. I'm sure by now some people have palpitations, heart palpitations, and are worried about this oral exam that they have to do. But this is really part of your preparation, part of your thesis, and you are not going to suddenly be thrown into the deep end. You have your supervisor or your supervisors, and throughout this process, you will hear me say, and everybody say, communication with your supervisor is key, and understanding the policies and the procedures is key. So if you do not understand anything around the oral examination, talk to your supervisor. All the departments have M&D coordinators, program coordinators. I'm sure you will know who the person is in that department. Make sure that you communicate and that you understand these processes and that you are really prepared for this oral exam that is coming your way. So if we look at the roles and responsibilities of this committee, we heard about the chair of department or the head of department, like Elena has mentioned. That person will be an observer. So for you as a student, you will be safe in the sense that there are observers. There are at least 5 members in the committee. It's not only the examiners. You are not left to the wolves. There are other people that observe the processes, they make sure that all the processes are followed correctly and that nothing is missed and that the student feels safe and supported. So the chair of department does not have any decision-making powers, so they are just in an observation role and will make sure that the processes are sound. Same with the higher degrees committee chairperson, which is also called the M&D coordinator. That person will be an observer and will also not have decision-making powers. But this person also understands the processes, knows the processes, is in communication with the supervisors in the department and with students. So this person will also be there to ensure that the environment is safe and conducive. Then the non-examining chairperson, you will hear a lot about this person. The person is appointed by Senate, and this person oversees the examination process, collates all the reports, and is the contact person in terms of the examination process. The non-examining chairperson does not have decision-making powers. He or she will chair this committee after it has been organized, the date has been determined, the person makes sure that everybody is available on the particular day and time. So that will be arranged through the office of the NEC. The students and the examiners will all receive the correct procedures and will know exactly what to do. During this examination, like Elena has mentioned, it will be recorded. So the minutes will be transcribed and the reports will be written from the recording. So you will be sure that everything that you said, everything that took place in that oral examination is recorded and will reflect on these reports. These oral exams typically take 30 to 45 minutes. The question and answer session of this session will, so as a student, you will have to be prepared to answer questions during this time, this 30 to 45 minutes. The non-examining chair will also make sure that the date that has been arranged for the oral exam is acceptable to all the examiners, that all the examiners can be present at the examination and that they will be able to participate in the examination. At the end of this examination, the non-examining chair will then make the recommendation to the head of college research and graduate studies so that the final results can be put together and released or processed further for the release of the results. The supervisor, as student, you do not have to be worried about being left alone in this committee or left to the wolves or left to a group of people that you do not know. Your supervisor or supervisors will be there, although they will not have any decision-making powers. They will not ask you any questions. So they are really there in a supportive role. The supervisor and the student really need to communicate before the time. And I'm going to say this many times, the communication between the supervisor and the student is very important in the preparation, because the student will also prepare a presentation and the supervisor will assist them in preparing the presentation. The student will then send the presentation to the supervisor, who will submit this presentation at least 24 hours before the oral exam to the non-examining chair or the chairperson of this exam committee as well. The supervisor will only communicate if there is a question or comments for clarity during the exam, but otherwise the supervisor will be quiet. And the supervisor will also then not be involved in the deliberations at the end or after the oral exam to finalize the results. The supervisor will be the person who will communicate with you after this oral exam, the examiners might have further corrections that they would like you to implement, and that will be communicated through the supervisor after the oral exam so that the student can make these final corrections. Right, the examiners, just as a background, for a doctoral study, there are 3 examiners, of which one will be an international examiner. In other words, the examiner will be working at an international institution or in another country. So there are 3 examiners, and all 3 of the examiners will be present at the oral examination. They have the full decision-making powers. So between the 3 examiners, they will make the final decision whether you pass the thesis, whether it is necessary that you make any further corrections or maybe clarity or more extensions to certain parts of the thesis. So they will also, when they ask questions, they will also interleave their questions. They will, one may follow on one examiner's questions, or ask a follow-up question, or ask more clarity after a question from another examiner. So between the 3 examiners, they will ask the questions. But they will also give you as a candidate an opportunity if you want to clarify something or if you would like to add something. So they will give you an opportunity to explain something if you wish so. At the end of the examination, they will then give the information to the non-examining chair, or any reports to the non-examining chair, and the supervisor will then communicate, as I said, with the student to make these corrections to the satisfaction of the examiners. Right. So the examiners may ask you different questions. So they could ask you questions on any aspects that are not clear, that they found in the thesis, or any claims that you made, any conclusions that you drew. They can ask you to substantiate certain recommendations, certain conclusions that you made, or to elaborate on some of the aspects. If they are missing data, such as it could be references, they could maybe not agree with some of the references, or ask more clarity about. Might be cases where references are old, and they might ask clarity on more recent sources. Are these references still valid? Are these claims that the researchers make still valid? And how you came to integrating that literature into your thesis. So it's important that you are also well aware of the latest literature, of the latest developments and the latest changes in that field. They could also ask you about your original contribution. Remember, a PhD study, we always say, must make a unique or original contribution to the body of knowledge. So they may ask you about the contribution that your study is making to the existing body of knowledge, and how you can contextualize your study within the existing body of knowledge. They could also ask you about the process, your research journey, how you came about doing certain things, any problems that arose, any changes you had to make to your original plan. So they can ask you about the journey as well. Then of course, they can also ask you about your methodology, how it came about using certain methods, and also when choosing a certain theory, how did you come about using that theory? How does that theory apply to your study? How did you apply your knowledge within the theoretical framework that you used? So know the theory that you've used, know why you used it. They can ask you questions about that. They could also ask you about future research, and that would link to your recommendations that you made for further research. How will your study contribute to future research, and what in this field should be researched further, or any major achievements that you've reached with this research. Maybe you have developed guidelines, and the guidelines have been implemented or tested in the field already. So make sure that you know what is happening after you have completed your study. What happened to your results? Was there any spin-off? Has anybody implemented some of the recommendations that you have made? So make sure that you know what is going on in the field. So then, key to the success is, as I said, is communication. So your communication about the research, your communication about your unique contribution that you have made or that you are making. So make sure that you understand those key issues about your research. And that key is, and I'm going to mention these 5, but we will discuss them in a bit more detail, is that you have to prepare yourself academically, prepare yourself well before this oral examination. Make sure that your environment is conducive, and we will talk about the environment and what it really means to have a conducive environment. Again, I'm going to repeat it over and over. Engage with your supervisor. You might think, oh, I'm done with my studies. I'm done with my supervisor. It's all over now. It is not. Until the results are out, until the articles are published, you are not done with your supervisor. And your supervisor is really your support in all the processes that are going to follow after you have submitted your thesis. A very important point is to prepare yourself mentally. We all know that an oral exam, like Eleanor has also said, it's not easy. It doesn't matter whether it's just a short oral presentation or an oral exam. There are always nerves, and there are always issues that can hamper the success of you engaging in this oral examination. And also key is that you showcase your unique contribution. Again, this is a PhD study, and we make a unique contribution to the body of knowledge, the larger existing body of knowledge. Your study is going to add to that body of knowledge. The next researcher or the next professional is going to read your work, is going to refer to your work, is going to ask questions. What did this researcher do? How did the researcher do it? Why did the researcher do this specific research? What is the contribution that this research makes to my specific field? And when I look at this picture, I want to pause here and ask you to not be the man in the right bottom corner. Don't be too complacent. Don't think, well, I've done my bit now. And as we all know that feeling as students, when you've completed your exam or when you've completed your studies, your research, you have that feeling of, I've done everything I could. I'm done. It's finished. This is as good as it gets. I'm happy. I've done my bit. Now it's over to the examiners. The examiners must now read it, and they can bring me feedback. Never be too complacent. Never be too happy about what you've done. Always make sure that you understand that there is a person on the other side, a reader, an examiner on the other side, that is going to read your work and is going to ask the questions. What did this researcher do? Did he or she follow the correct procedures? Could he or she have done it differently? Could they have focused on another aspect of the topic? Why these conclusions? Where did the conclusions come from? Where did these findings come from? Do these findings make sense? So you must keep on asking yourself these questions. Don't be too complacent and say, I've submitted my thesis or I've completed the research, I'm happy. Always make sure that you check and recheck and ask yourself these questions. Become your own devil's advocate. Ask the questions, what would someone else think of this? How will they read this? How will they understand this? Sorry. Right, so now the processes around preparing for the oral examination. Remember, this is now new to the university, and all the departments will still find their feet in terms of how they're going to prepare their students. The departments normally have an information tutorial letter. It is normally in the 301 tutorial letter categories. And this is an information tutorial letter that will tell you about the processes of the M&D journey that you're going to have. And they will explain to you how they will prepare you for the oral exam in the department. So some departments might have colloquia, some departments might have regular training sessions or more individualized training sessions. It could be sessions between the supervisor and the student. It will most probably be online sessions, but there could even be face-to-face sessions. But you will be prepared on a regular basis. There will be information communicated to you on this oral examination and how to prepare yourself for the oral examination. So one of the requirements is that you prepare a 30-minute electronic presentation, and you will ask your supervisor to look at your presentation, to give you guidance on the presentation, to read through your final presentation and make sure that you've included the important information, but also that the presentation is prepared in a professional manner. So the presentation will typically, the first page will have your name and the title of your study, the degree that you have enrolled for. Some departments have more than one degree, so the specific degree name will be part of your title page. You will have an introduction and a background to the study. Here you will contextualize the topic and let the examiners understand what was the background to why you've done this research and the justification for the study. And then also the problem statement. What was the problem that you've identified? Why was it necessary to do this study? That will then lead to your purpose statement or the aim of your study and the objectives. And always remember, we talk about the golden thread that must run through your study. And this will also be very important in your presentation, that link, that congruence between your title, the background, the problem, the purpose, and the objectives of the study. And then, of course, you will also explain the methods and the materials used. You will explain what research approach you used, what design you used, who was your population, and what sampling technique you've used. You will definitely also explain the ethical principles around your study. The ethical clearance that was received, was that based on a proposal that still has the same title of as the final study, and we will talk about the title a bit later. So all the aspects related to the methods and the materials you will include. Then, of course, you will also highlight the most important results or findings of your study. You cannot give all the detail of all the findings. Remember, you have 30 minutes, but you can highlight the most important results or the most important findings of your study. And then the conclusions that were drawn from these findings. Again, we talk about the congruence. Make sure that there is congruence between the results or findings and the conclusions. And then also, you will also explain what amendments were made after the first round. Remember, there are two rounds of examination. After the first round of examination, you would have made some amendments, some corrections. You will engage in those discussions around what corrections were made or changes were made. And then also, again, the originality of your contribution. What will it contribute to the bigger scientific body of knowledge? Right. You will share this presentation with your supervisor at least 2 days before the oral examination. The supervisor will read through it, make sure that in terms of technical presentation that everything is well done and it's a professional presentation, that you've included all the important information in this presentation, and you might have a practice session with your supervisor where you present this to your supervisor. It can either be face-to-face or in an online platform, but make sure that you practice that and that you are well prepared. So you will present yourself on the day of the oral exam and on time as well. This will be arranged well in advance, so you will have sufficient time to arrange your time and availability for the defense. In the case where a candidate is unable to defend the thesis within 2 months or receiving confirmation of the viva voce from the non-examining chair, the candidate may, in writing, request an alternative date and time from the NEC. The NEC. This is a section that was taken from the procedures, so please make sure, should it happen that you cannot attend the oral examination, you might be traveling to a conference, or you might be sick, or there might be other reasons for not being able to attend the oral examination. Please make sure that you communicate, that this is communicated with a non-examining chair, but in writing, with a proper justification of why you cannot attend that day or time. When you submit your thesis for examination, you will submit it in a PDF format. After you've made the corrections, you will again put it in a PDF format. So when you prepare for the oral examination, make sure that you have that latest version of your thesis, the electronic copy with the exact pages as it was submitted to the examiners, so that you have it at hand when they ask questions or they refer you to certain sections of the thesis. You will then revise your thesis. After the oral examination, you will revise your thesis based on the additional recommendations that were made by the examiners to get the final thesis that will be submitted. The official results of this oral exam will be released within 4 weeks after the supervisor has confirmed that the corrections that you made after the oral examination, that they have indeed been done, and the supervisor will ask you for the final version and will most probably ask you to submit it to him or her with the corrections highlighted so that they can see what the corrections are before they finalize it. You will remove the highlights before the thesis is finalized, but just as an assistance to the supervisor, you will highlight those sections so that the supervisor is sure that the corrections have been made. Now, the examination preparation starts with you, and it is going to depend on you whether you are prepared well enough. You have support, you have your supervisor. If your supervisor cannot support you with a certain question or concern that you have, the non-examining chairperson is there. The M&D coordinator in the department is also available to assist with any questions that relate to the oral examination. But the preparation is really key, and it starts with you. Right. In terms of your academic preparation, and it might seem as repetition, but I want you to make sure that you understand that you have to prepare yourself academically very well. Refresh your memory. We are all human. We engage in research in a PhD study for many years. It becomes your morning, noon, and night. It becomes your life. And the day you submit that thesis, there is a feeling of, oh, now I've done my part. I just want to forget about this. Now it's somebody else's problem. It's not my problem at this stage. And we all feel like that when we submit our thesis. That is really a normal and a natural feeling. So it is important that you go back to that thesis, that you go and read that thesis again, that you make sure that you remember everything, that you understand everything. It's your intellectual property, it's your product. You're going to market your product, you're going to showcase what you have done. But it's important that you remember, that you refresh your memory, that you make sure that you can still speak with authority when you talk about the study. So read through your thesis again, read through the examiner's reports that you got during the first round of examination, and read through the corrections that you made. You will, when you make the corrections during the first round, you will put the corrections or respond on the corrections in table format. So you will have the corrections and also how you've made the changes. So there will be that report. Refresh your memory about what you have changed. Are there any new developments that have taken place in this field? Did people maybe implement your guidelines or your strategies or the model that you've developed? Were there any other studies that are similar to your study or speak to the same field of study? So make sure that you know what the latest developments are. Remember that the examiners are experts in the field, so they might have the latest information. They might ask you questions about new trends that maybe came after completion of your study. So make sure that you refresh your memory, that you are well prepared in terms of the content and the subject field of your study. Know the problem, the purpose, the objective. So why did I do this study? What was the problem that was identified and why was it necessary? What was the justification for this study, the rationale of behind the study? Why was it a researchable and feasible topic to study? So make sure that you can sell the study that you've completed. Same with your methodology and the justification of the choice of methodology. So many PhD students do mixed methods research, and when you ask them, but why did you do mixed methods research? Sometimes students, or often students, struggle and they would say, but isn't it more comprehensive to do both qualitative and quantitative research in one study? You must know what the reason was for your methodology. It was not merely because it was more comprehensive. There was a reason. There was a justification for the choice of the methodology. So make sure that you can explain that, and that the examiners can see that you knew that this was the best methodology. This was the best way of approaching this research problem. You would have made recommendations that would have spoken to further research. It would have spoken to recommendations for practice, recommendations maybe for policy, recommendations for education, or recommendations for a clinical practice, depending on the discipline you are in. Why did you make those recommendations? Are those recommendations feasible? Are they tangible? Did you merely list recommendations, or will the reader have an understanding of, if I implement this recommendation, this is how I can do it? know the practical examples or ways of implementing these recommendations. And then again, as mentioned before, the contribution that your study has made to the body of knowledge. This you will hear a lot in your doctoral studies, that supervisors will talk about it. People will ask you, but what is the unique contribution that your study is going to make? Why should I at all read this research? Why is it important? Why will it maybe change practice or address a gap in the literature or speak to certain problems in practice? So make sure that you can explain what these contributions are. Then your physical preparation. We talk about a conducive environment. What does a conducive environment mean? It means that we must really be ready. This is an online examination. Do I have the correct online equipment? Is it available on that day? Is my internet connection well, or is it good? What about load shedding? Is there a load shedding plan? What am I going to do if there is unexpected load shedding or power failure? How will I deal with that? Does my computer have battery power? Do I have additional Wi-Fi connections if my system at home does not work, or at office, or wherever it is? So make sure that your online availability and your online equipment is good, and that you are prepared for that. You have to keep on your camera during the oral presentation. And having said that, we all have stories to tell, especially now since COVID. We all have stories to tell about people who put their cameras on, and they are maybe in bed, very comfortable, sitting in bed, taking this meeting or doing this oral examination. Please be cognizant of the background in the camera. Yes, children who are in the background and play, they are cute, but in this case, we do not want to see that. We do not want to see your bed's headboard. We do not want to see people moving around in the background. So make sure that your background is suitable for an oral examination. We all live in the era of technology, of AI, and we can all have backgrounds that we can download from the internet, so that we do not show our own real background. Same with background noise. Make sure that it is quiet. Where you take this, or where you do this oral examination, is very important. If it is, for example, at work, make sure that you have privacy. Make sure that the door is closed. If need be, you can lock the door so that someone does not walk in. Have a notice on the door to ask people to keep quiet. Inform people in your workplace, in the environment, that you will be engaging in an oral examination and that you need silence. So the preparation will really be key, that you are sure that there are no disturbances. Have a glass of water ready, and like myself, I have cough mixture next to me, I have water, I have lozenges next to me because I'm recovering from a very bad cold. So make sure that you have all of that next to you, should you start coughing, or should you need some water, or if you feel that this is becoming very stressful now, that you have a glass of water to take a sip or two. Like I've mentioned before, your thesis must be next to you, the correct version of the thesis with the correct page numbers, so that you can go to the pages when they refer you to a specific page, when they want to discuss a specific point. Have that ready. same with a pen and a paper, so that you can make notes if they ask questions. If you think you need to reconsider a question, make a few notes, ask them to allow you just a minute or two to just gather your thoughts in terms of that question. And then the big culprit, switch off your mobile phone. Then the psychological preparation, I think some of it I've mentioned already, but it is important that we prepare ourselves psychologically. This is an oral examination. It is a stressful situation. It doesn't matter how well you understand and how confident you feel about your study. It is a stressful situation. And under these circumstances, you sometimes just don't know what to say. You don't know how to answer a question. So it is important that you prepare yourself well, and that you remain calm during this oral examination. And your preparation, again, I want to take you back to the comments that we've made about your supervisor. Communicate with your supervisor. Practice your presentation with your supervisor. Ask your supervisor to ask you questions. Ask the supervisor to play devil's advocate and ask you some questions that might be challenging, or that might require you to really delve deep into what you have done in your study, so that you are prepared well for whatever is coming your way. And then, of course, if you prepare well in terms of the academic preparation, you will understand the processes, you will understand and remember what you have done, what the difficulties were in the study, what the highlights of your study were, what the contributions of your study are. So that all of that will make you calm and will give you the confidence to communicate your research with the examiners. Then when you have to join the session, make sure that you join the session well in time, so that you can calm down, that you make sure that you are connected, that the connection works well, that your camera works well, that the background is not a problem, that the sound is not a problem. But remember, you have the knowledge. It's like this nut that's on the slide there. Just open up that nut. Open up that knowledge base that you have. You have the knowledge. You are the expert on the topic. You've done a doctoral study. You've completed a thesis. I think it was Elena, I think you mentioned that it's the highest academic qualification that you have engaged in, and that you are going to receive after this examination. You have that knowledge, you have the experience, you did the research, you made certain decisions in the research. So just feel confident about that, and that will assist you in the end to be calm during this oral examination. And we can talk about many things that you can do to prepare yourself psychologically. You know, you can do a presentation to critical friends, and they can listen to you, they can ask questions, they can give feedback on the way in which you answer questions, the type of answers that you've given. So whatever works for you in terms of preparation, use that, but do prepare. Right, so now you come to the end of your oral examination and the completion of your study. And this is really the beginning of a wonderful, wonderful highway that lies in front of you. You know, people say life begins at 40, but I want to say for many people, life begins when you've completed your doctoral study. So see this as the end of a very, very, very good journey, and enjoy the preparation that you're going to do for this oral examination. Your results will be released fairly some people might say 4 weeks are long, but remember there are many administrative processes that have to take place. After you've made the final corrections, your supervisor has confirmed that these corrections are indeed the corrections that were required by the examiners during the oral examination. And the supervisor will then submit the final report through the non-examining chairperson, who will submit the examination reports to the next level. So it will take at least 4 weeks. They say the policy says that it will be released within 4 weeks. So communicate with your supervisor about the results, but please give the 4 weeks time for that to be completed. Your supervisor will be your contact person and will keep you informed, but the supervisor will not give you the exam results. The exam results will be released by the examination department, the College of Graduate Studies office, and not your supervisor, but your supervisor will ensure that the reports go to the next level as soon as the corrections have been made. Right, so then I want to open this discussion for questions and comments. I know this might be overwhelming because it might be new for many students. Well, it is new for all of us, but the news might be new to many students. So I would like to open the floor for comments and questions. I'm going to stop sharing. Can you hear me?
Well, I can hear you, Gisela. Colleagues, thank you. There was quite a number of questions on the chat, and I really tried to answer all of them. And I think it's important that there is a link where you can see access to the presentation that we've prepared for you, and you are welcome to download it. If there's any questions, please feel free, and if you feel a bit more comfortable to write on the chat, please do that. You are really very welcome.
Right. If I go to the first question, it actually is addressed to Eleanor. Oh, Eleanor, I see you have answered that question.
I've answered all of them. I hope that everybody had a look at the questions and the answers to that. I'm sure if there were questions on those, I think I've covered it. I think the one that was very interesting is the one that one of the colleagues said that why, if I already passed the thesis, why do we now also have a viva? And I think the important part is to understand that both the thesis and the viva, there's where there is a first round and a second round of examination. The fact that you have submitted a written work doesn't mean that you know what is going on in it. And I'm sure you have heard of ghostwriters, of all kinds of things. And this is just part of the integrity. When you finish your qualification at Unisa, you've done a viva. If you go to for a job interview, they know you've done an oral defense. You have shown that it was your own work that you've done. You have knowledge on the subject that you've done your research on.
Thank you. I see there was somebody who also asked about the presentation skills. If there are if there is support to prepare your presentation, yes, there is always training available in terms of, for example, presentation skills as well. But like I've mentioned, it's important that you also practice your presentation with your supervisor. That is often a very good way of making sure that you are prepared for the oral, because the supervisor understands your study, the supervisor knows you, and that will also help you. The supervisor can ask you certain questions that that can make you think, that can take you out of your comfort zone and make sure that you will be able to answer questions from the examiners, unexpected questions from the examiners, for example. I see there was also someone who asked about the masters. The master students will only do an oral exam if called upon. That is not part of the examination process. But the importance of this twofold examination process is also to actually show that you can communicate your unique contribution. You know, we don't always think about how big this thing actually is. The fact that we are doing a doctoral study, the fact that we are contributing to a scientific body of knowledge, that's a big thing. And I'm not sure we always realize how big it is, how important it is. And for me to send information and reports into the scientific world, I must be certain of what I have done. Other people must be certain, scholars must be certain that this research that was done, the report that was written, the contribution that was made is indeed scientific. And yes, talking about ghost writers, that does happen. We've heard about people who have plagiarized PhD studies. We have heard about the corruption in the academic field. So this it's not the main focus to try and catch out somebody who plagiarized a study. But yes, it is a way to prevent something like that. But the focus, the importance of an oral defense is that with a thesis, you submit the written word, you submit the report, but you become a scholar in the scientific world. And as a scholar, you must be able to stand up in front of the scientific world and share your research and discuss your findings, discuss your research, justify why you've done it this way and not that way, justify why this was a researchable topic, convince people of what, looking at your recommendations, using your contribution that you've made, be it a model that you've developed, be it policies that you've developed or guidelines, or what your recommendations are. But you have to, I mentioned before that you are selling your product, you are marketing your scientific knowledge, your intellectual property, you are marketing that, you are building the scientific body of knowledge. So it's actually a very important part of sharing with the scientific world what was done. Are there any questions that we have not addressed? I'm sure many of you might have more questions. Tomorrow night we will discuss preparing for examination, and some of these aspects will then be discussed again. We will talk about how you prepare all the work in your before your examination process, and also how you then respond to examiners' comments. So if there are more questions tomorrow night, some of this will be, you will just be reminded of this again, and your memory will be refreshed in terms of some of these things. then I just want to look at the.
Gisela, can I just quickly? It seems that there on the chat, people are talking about the publishing of 2 papers. There's a big difference. Part of the curriculum of a doctoral student. Previously, I just want to take it a bit back. Previously, even master students had to do 1 manuscript. And there's a difference between a manuscript and a published work. The manuscript means that you have submitted a work or an article to an accredited journal. Colleagues, if we have to wait until they approve publication, you will only graduate 5 or 2 or 3 years from now. So what we expect during the curriculum, for the curriculum of this, when you are required to do the 2 manuscripts, you must just prove that you've submitted 2 manuscripts to an accredited journal. Your supervisor will guide you on this, so don't stress about it. And I see somebody said if I was registered in 2019, if I remember correctly, from 2021, Gisela, I know that there was an error in the current M&D procedures, but we are correcting it at the next Senate. If you were registered from 2021, you have to submit 2 manuscripts. And as I've said, it's not, you don't have to wait until they are published and approved as articles. It is just the proof that you've submitted them that forms part of that examination process. So don't stress about it.
Thank you, Eleanor. I see there's a comment or a question, actually, what happens if my thesis is fine, but I'm not able to defend my thesis? And thank you for your answer there, Eleanor. I just also want to say that if your thesis, if the written report is fine and you prepare well, you will be fine during the oral examination. Remember, you've engaged in this research for so many years, and it's become your daily thought processes. You will be able to respond well in the oral examination. It will depend on how well you prepare. And yes, you might struggle. You might think that you cannot answer the questions, but the examiners are not going to try to catch you out. They actually just want to confirm whether what you have written, and if you have passed the written one, then they want to confirm what you have written is indeed what you have done and that you understand what you have written. So the chances of failing an oral after you have passed or after you've done well in your written part, really, I want to be positive and optimistic that is not something that should happen or will easily happen. The examiners do not use a specific rubric where they give you 2 out of 5 or 2 out of 10 for an answer. They have a guide, and the guide will lead them to what the understanding is that you have to have. In other words, how do you understand the scientific contribution? How do you understand the methodology and the soundness of the methodology? How do you understand the contribution that the study has made? How do you contextualize what you have done into the scientific body of knowledge? So it's a level of understanding that they are assessing, and not necessarily ticking a rubric, or well, they don't tick a rubric and give you 3 out of 5 because you've mentioned 3 of the 5 important points. So they rather want to understand or assess your understanding of the process and the methods and the context and the topic that you've researched. I'm just going through these questions to see if there's anything else. Eleanor, you have spoken about the manuscripts that need to be submitted. The manuscripts, the proof that is needed with the manuscripts is the proof that the manuscripts were submitted to a journal. And you will hear me talk about manuscripts because until it is not published, it is a manuscript. When it's published, we talk about an article. So yes, you have to submit 2 manuscripts, and the supervisor will have to submit the proof of the submission of the manuscripts to a journal. There's a question. I wanted to ask a question on how I can draft an abstract to submit for presentation at NER, even though I'm not yet done with my studies. However, this presentation has given me exact. Oh, thank you. Okay, thank you for that. In terms of the master's students, like Eleanor has said, the new M&D procedures do not require that the manuscript as part of the examination process of a master's study. But as a supervisor, as an academic, as a researcher, I want to plea with all master's students as well. Communicate your research. And the reality is that our colleagues out there, scholars or practitioners, are not going to read a master's dissertation. They're not going to read a thesis. They want to have an article. They want to go to a scientific journal and find an article. They want to search for an article. They're not going to read your thesis and your dissertation. I think we all live in the ideal world if we think people are going to read this hard work that we've done, the full 300 pages or 250 pages or 150 pages. They're not going to read that full thesis or dissertation. They want a condensed, focused article that focuses on a very specific either a part of a study or the full study, but written in a scientific journal article of say 5,000 words, 8,000 words. They're not going to read the full dissertation. So my plea is, even though it is not compulsory for a master's student, discuss this with your supervisor. Prepare a manuscript for your from your master's study as well. And with the doctoral students, there are so many more possibilities than 2 manuscripts. So if you feel you can publish more than 2 manuscripts, if your supervisor wants to co-publish with you more than 2 articles, do that. Or if you want to continue on your own, do that. But it's important that you communicate your research with the scientific community. You've worked hard on that. You've contributed. It's actually a unique situation. You've contributed to the body of knowledge. Use that opportunity to communicate that information. Let me just quickly go. Okay, you've answered the colleague who asked, I've started in 2021. No, the previous M&D procedures indicated students from 2021, but the new approved procedures indicate that it's only students who first registered in 2022. There's a question, is there a maximum number of pages or a limit to the doctorate? There are universities that do place limits on the number of pages or the number of words. But, you know, in actual fact, it is about communicating concise, correct, comprehensive, detailed information. Do not try to stretch something if you are not somebody who writes long paragraphs. You might be more concise and to the point. If we look at the principles of scientific writing, it says be concise and to the point. But some people have a way of elaborating more than other people. So it depends on your scientific writing style. It depends on the topic that you are investigating. It depends on the methodology that you have used. It depends on the extent of the research. There are many factors that play a role. But your supervisor will guide you. Your supervisor will tell you, you need to elaborate more on this section, or you need to cut down on this. It's too much detail, or it is repetition. And that often happens. And we can talk about that maybe tomorrow as well when we talk about preparing for examination. But that is when you prepare your chapters, and it also depends on the departments. But in some departments, chapter one is typically chapter one is your introductory chapter, and then you have a full methodology chapter. So if you have methodology in your introductory chapter, make sure that it's only an overview of the methodology in that chapter. And when you get to the methodology chapter, it's the detailed discussion and explanation of your methodology that you've used. So the length of and the number of words really is something that you discuss with your supervisor. Elena, are there specific word counts in the procedure?
Yes, thank you. I've just indicated the procedures. I quickly, sorry if you just saw the side of my face, I quickly went to my second screen. We're looking at 25,000 to 45,000 words for a doctoral thesis.
Just repeat the number again.
25,000 to 45,000 words.
Okay. All right. So that is in the procedures, but again, it may vary in terms of all the specific aspects related to your study. I see there's a question in the case of health studies. How many articles are expected to be published? It is the same as in the other departments. 2 manuscripts must be prepared as part of the examination process. At least 2. Well, as I said, if you want to prepare more, that is between you and your supervisor, or it is your choice. But for doctoral studies, it must be 2 manuscripts that are prepared. And for master's studies, we recommend that you publish at least 1. There are master students who publish more than 1. It depends on your study, of course. And also it depends on, and some of you might have heard of it, it depends on whether you are going to salami slice or not. Now, salami slicing, just in short, is when people use one study and they literally, like you would slice a salami, then publish many articles on that one study. Now, there's not a limitation on how many you can publish from one study. The important point is that each article must have its own focus, must have its own content and uniqueness. So if you put that article, if you publish 3 articles and you put them through a similarity test, that it must not pick up the same results in all 3 of the articles. So each article is a standalone, unique unit that is published from a thesis or a dissertation. So make sure that if you publish more than, say, for example, you publish more than 2 articles from a PhD study, that article 1 reports on a different part of the study. Article 2 reports on its own part of the study. Article 3 has its own focus and own data and information. So that is the important point when you publish articles from your thesis and your dissertation. And if you do not want to be accused of salami slicing. I just want to see if there are more questions. Was that the last one? The question on the number of articles. Are there any more questions? I don't know if people can open their mic, or if that is not possible. Danae can maybe just indicate if that is possible.
No, they only have the chat option.
Right, thank you. Okay, if there are no other questions, I just want to make sure that I'm not missing anything. Eleanor, from your side, can you see any other questions?
Yeah, the one that just came in, Gisela, is the training prepare the student for examination. I think earlier there was a question on whether Unisa actually assists students to train them to do presentation skills, and I'm almost think that this question is about that as well. And I've indicated that the supervisor will help there, but I will also ask Tony Machilla to see whether we cannot do some or other presentation on preparing and developing your presentation skills. I think it's a very valid question and a request, so I will be sending an email after our session to Tony Machilla and that section to prepare something, and then we will communicate with you via WhatsApp to indicate when that session will take place. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Eleanor. And then in terms of training to prepare you for the actual oral examination, that will depend, the format of that will depend on each department. As I mentioned at the beginning, it is new to all of us. So all the departments will then plan for this preparation of the students. How are they going to prepare their students for the oral defense? Will it be a matter of communication and training between the supervisor and the student? Will there be departmental training sessions? And as an M&D coordinator, I want to say that we will certainly look at departmental training sessions, which will also assist the supervisors in how to support the students, because the supervisor and the student, they are really in this together. The supervisor is just in a supportive role. The supervisor cannot examine, so the supervisor really is going to support the student and make sure that the student is prepared as best as possible for this oral examination. We will not leave you all on your own to survive this this change. Then I see there's, I started the program in 2018. Is the viva still applicable? No, you will not do a viva if you have started in 2018. Oh, I see Eleanor has answered there. Okay, then I don't see any other questions. There's a last one. I see there is, someone mentions here, there is a program for preparation to prepare M&D. Last day of abstract submission is 25 August, in case anyone is interested. I'm not sure what NER stands for. Idris, if you can maybe just write the full meaning of the abbreviation NER. Then there's a question, is there a guideline for writing articles? Yes, there are many guidelines on how to write an article or prepare a manuscript. There is also training on how to do that. But if you speak to your supervisor as well, your supervisor will be a published scholar and will also give you guidance on how to prepare the manuscript. But there are guidelines, general guidelines for scientific writing, but there are also guidelines for each journal. So when you decide on publishing or aiming to publish in a specific journal, you will go to the website of that journal, and that journal will have a section that says author guidelines. They will have their specific guidelines that you have to follow. before you can submit the manuscript to them. So they will have a very specific format. They will give you the specific headings that you have to follow. They will give you the word count. So each journal has their own guidelines to write or to prepare the manuscript if you plan on submitting to them. But general guidelines in terms of writing articles, yes, there is training that is done at the university as well. So you will, it will be communicated to students via your My Unisa platform, but with your supervisor as well. Some departments have writing workshops, scientific writing workshops. So it depends on what is available in your department, but the university certainly also has that. So there are different aspects that you need to take into consideration when you prepare an article or a manuscript. I see it's Unisa Northeast region, the NER. Thank you very much for that. Okay, then I don't see any other questions. I'll give it a few seconds to see if there are questions coming up, seeing that we still have about 30 minutes. You're still welcome to pop a question.
There's a question, Gisela. May I please ask if the registration includes proposal phase? The year that the student registered for the PhD proposal. From 2023, the standalone research proposal module was incorporated into the thesis. So in your first year, you will still do the research proposal, but it's no longer a module. If you were registered in 2022, 2021, 2020, where that formed part of your curriculum, you should have passed it in after 1 year. And you would have seen permission was given to students who did not complete the proposal module in 2022 to register directly for the thesis in 2023, or in the case of a master's for the dissertation. So it's no longer a separate module. The registration is now either for a thesis or for a dissertation. But I will anyway also write the answer there if you want to look at it later. Okay.
Thank you. Then I see there's a comment that says, thank you so much for the presentation. Please, I want to ask if the university do have a student and supervisor monitor program, because based on the presentation, it shows that the supervisor is the backbone behind a student's success. Yes, the university has monitoring processes in place. There is a supervisor-student agreement, a contract, that should be in place for each student and supervisor. The supervisor also reports all activities on the system, so it could be monitored at any time. And students also can communicate with departments, with the M&D coordinator or the chair of department, should they feel concerned about their relationship with the supervisor. Always first talk to the supervisor and make sure that the relationship is sound between you and the supervisor. But remember, although the supervisor is the backbone, like you mentioned in this comment, in the end, it is you, the student, who is going to be examined, who has to do the oral examination. The supervisor has a supportive role. So the supervisor has a developmental role in terms of getting you to completion of your study and supports you throughout your studies. And then during the oral examination, in terms of the preparation, the supervisor has a developmental role again to assist you in preparing as best as possible for your oral examination, and be moral support and be academic support throughout the process. But in the end, the student has to pass the examination. And in the end, it is the student who is examined and not the supervisor. But make sure that you talk to your supervisor. And if you do not get joy in that, don't feel alone. Don't sit at home and give up. There are always ways of communicating. Go to the next level, and the next level would typically be your M&D coordinator in the department, or the chair of department, or if you're in a region, if you, for example, in Ethiopia, the regional office in Ethiopia, or if you, wherever you are, there are regional offices, but do not suffer in your corner. There is help, there's always support, and make sure that you make use of all possible support. Do not ignore the fact that if there is a concern between you and the supervisor, or the relationship between you and the supervisor, do not ignore I want to say the correct lines of communication, but the professional way of doing it. First, talk to your supervisor. First, sort out the issue between you and the supervisor. It may just be some misunderstanding, but communicate with your supervisor. That is key. That you always communicate. It is a relationship. You know, I don't think we always understand how intense this relationship between student and supervisor can be, or is, because when you do research, when you enroll for your postgraduate studies, it is a big thing. It takes a lot of your time. It takes effort. It takes money. It takes you away from other things, from your family, maybe on times that you want to be with them. So it is a difficult journey. And your supervisor is with you on that journey, and it's important that that relationship is sound, that you also work on that relationship, and that you cherish that relationship, and that if there is a problem, that you address the issue as quick as possible, so that the journey is as painless as possible.
Gisela, if I may come in here,
Yes.
It happens many times. It's so important when you are registered, especially for the first time, to make sure that you meet, whether it's virtual or in person, with your supervisor. Look at that agreement. And because you must also understand, the supervisor does not only supervise you. We have supervisors that supervise many. Prof. Gisela is one of them, that supervise many students. So you have to come up with an agreement. That is why that supervisor agreement is there. If your supervisor, if you agree that you're going to submit work on, say, the 31st of March, and now something happens in your life, and now you know, oh, now suddenly there's either a wedding or whatever, and you have to be part of that preparation, you won't be able to make that. Talk and make sure that you communicate with your supervisor. It is so important that they are aware that you're not going to make it. Remember, they also plan their processes to make sure, okay, Elena is going to submit on 31st March, Gisela is going to submit on the 15th of April, that they also plan around when you're going to submit. And then you also agree that once I submit, I'm going to wait 2 or 3 weeks before I get a reply. That you don't panic when it doesn't happen. I submit it tonight and tomorrow morning I have a reply. I think that is so important. And I think I want to just reiterate what Prof. Gisela said. Talk to your supervisor first. And if you've done everything, we do get to say, but the person doesn't respond to me. Sometimes there's a reason for that. We check with the department what is going on, only to find, I had just yesterday or the day before, I was informed, but the person passed away. And then the student was not aware of it. So though there are many things that can cause it, that the supervisor do not respond to you as quickly as you would want to. I was lucky when I did my MBL, and then I always thought, okay, I've submitted work now, I'm going to have at least a week. The next morning, my prof, he worked through the night for some other reason. I got my reply. But that is really unique circumstances. So just be aware, you are not the only student that they supervise. Have that sympathy and empathy also with your supervisor. And vice versa. That's that building that relationship with your supervisor. That's so important.
I think, well, I see there's another question about the guidelines, and I suppose these are the guidelines for preparing a manuscript, where the student says, I'm not getting guidance from the supervisor. Now, in terms of the PhD studies, your supervisors have to guide you. It's part of the supervision process. Even with the masters, it's part of the developmental processes. So discuss that with your supervisor. The departments also in their tutorial letters, their information tutorial letters, often also explain the basic guidelines of scientific writing and preparing a manuscript. So talk to your supervisor, talk to your departmental M&D coordinator to get the specific guidelines that you would need. But then also when you aim for a specific journal, look at the author guidelines in that journal. And I see someone also mentioned on YouTube the M&D research training videos that are available. But don't suffer in the corner if you do not get assistance in terms of preparing a manuscript. Follow the different routes of getting some support, because one needs support to prepare a manuscript is not easy. You need support. It's experience that you need to gain. Even as a seasoned author, sometimes you also struggle to conceptualize a manuscript or to write a manuscript. So it's important that you get support to prepare the manuscripts. I see there was someone who said they joined late and they asked the meaning of a viva voce or a viva. It's an oral examination or an oral defense. It is implemented, it's newly implemented now in the university. Then there's a last one. My topic has been approved. Does that mean I should proceed to collect data? Remember, you can never collect data if you don't have ethical clearance. You need an ethical clearance certificate before you can collect data, and you need the go-ahead from your supervisor. So the fact that your title has been, or your topic has been approved does not mean that you can collect data. There are many processes that have to take place before you get to data collection. And I think that is a very general, I don't want to say a mistake, a misunderstanding, but there's a general thinking out there that research is about the data collection. Research is about the process. See it as baking a cake. Baking a cake is not only whisking the eggs. Baking a cake is reading the recipe, preparing the ingredients before I start with the recipe, and then following all the steps. And it's the same with research. There are many steps that you have to follow. It is a process. So never jump into the data collection unless you have confirmed with your supervisor everything is in place. My ethical clearance is in place. It is valid. I have the permission from all the sites or whatever setting where I'm going to do my research. But discuss that with your supervisor and always wait for the go-ahead by your supervisor. Okay, I think those were all the questions, Elena.
That is, I'm just quickly doing publish to see if there's any more coming up. I think we've covered all of them.
All right, thank you very much for listening and attending this time of day, and I hope that we've given you some thoughts to just prepare you for the oral examination that is coming, and that it's not the end of the world. It's part of the journey. It's going to grow you as a scholar, and remember that communication and preparation is key. I see there's another question that came in, and we will take this last one. Is the defense done online or on face-to-face? Right at the beginning, Eleanor explained that it's an online process. In exceptional cases, there will be a face-to-face, but it is an online process.
Gisela, maybe just also, you will see that I have also shared, after I found it, the NAIO actually gave the link where our presentation is available. So just have a look in the chat. The link is there where you can access all the information on the presentation that was given.
Thank you, Eleanor. Then thank you very much to everybody, and have a good evening.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.